get one?
Listen, I've never had any problem expressing my opinions, but what we're doing here is bigger than that. These are conversations that need to be had in an unfiltered way. Drag racing's all I've ever done. It's all I care to do. I respect the history, I appreciate how far we've come, but I want more for this sport, and I'll fight for it. It's uncut, it's unfiltered. This is the show of shows. The biggest names in drag racing. No holds barred. This is the great American motorsport. Drag racing. Prove me wrong. I'll wait. JT's got the levels up. Give me more, T, dude. In the booth. Give me more. Bring it up. No, I'm just joking. Pull it back down.
I couldn't hear you just say turn it down.
Do you want me to spit a rhyme? I brought a samurai sword for today.
Good.
We're going to get down to business. No. Hey, gang. What's up? Wes Buck here, Drag Illustrated Magazine, checking in. It is Wednesday, May 8th, 2024. Hope you're doing well. We've got an action-packed show for you today. Not only do I have a samurai sword. Let me get it out again. I have a samurai sword, but we're also going to be joined by the one and only Chris Bell, longtime friend of the show here at Drag Illustrated, one of my close personal friends. We've got a friendship that goes back 20 years. It's hard to believe I know anybody for 20 years, to be honest. I mean, that seems like a long time. However,
you're 22, right?
Yeah, I'm 22. So Chris and I first hooked up when I was 2 years old. It was real weird, but we were both talking about shocks. You know, at the daycare, and one thing led to another, and here we are 20 years later, 22.
Gotta get that stroller straight, you know?
And gotta get that stroller straight. And man, we're running a little bit behind. I just had an hour-long lunch date with my dear friend Marty Robertson. He's in the chat right now. What's up, Marty? He's here in spirit. He's here in spirit. And we've actually got a special guest for you guys at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. About 45 minutes from now, we'll be joined by the one, the only, the talk of town right now. Perhaps, I think I'm going to throw this label out here, and this could be controversial. Public enemy number one in drag racing right now. I mean, you talk about a guy that's got a target on his back the size of Texas. Bob Tasca III will be here in about 45 minutes. We'll talk all things drag racing with Bob. But before we do that, let's introduce my cohorts here on the Wes Buck Show, the ones and onlys. JT Hudson, Mike Carpenter. What's up, boys? We got
What's
Chris.
up?
Chris, you're like checking in from the crib. You're at home today, right?
Yep. Yeah, we got tornadoes everywhere. We had tornado touchdown about 5 miles in 2 different directions in the last 2 hours. So no
perfect time to do a podcast.
Yes. Yeah, well, no internet.
We got that headed our way. And now it's headed toward us.
No electric at the shop, and so Wes texts me, and I'm like, all right, I'm going home.
This isn't going to work to do it from the shop, but no, I appreciate it, man. It's been a wild couple of weeks weather-wise, man. I mean, it was our hearts go out to everybody in Oklahoma. I can't even think. Nebraska was also impacted massively by storms. It's been a wild go of it. And I mean, I was just thinking about it the other day. Midwest Drag Racing Series, back-to-back rainouts to start the season, dealing with some weather this weekend in Tulsa. But, you know, such is the good fight, right? We go drag race. Chris, let me ask you this. Are you one of the guys that didn't check the weather? I'm that guy. Like, if I'm committed to going drag racing, the week it's already marked off. I checked the weather, my ass. We're going.
When I go to a race, I know if it's going to rain when I walk out of the trailer and it's raining. Because
exactly right.
We were in NHRA Gainesville one time in late 90s, and they called the event for the weekend Saturday morning, and it sunshine the next 2 days. Beautiful. Nice, and so you can't.
We've had that happen several times. Yeah,
you can't predict it. You can't.
Yeah, but you have to. That decision has to be made way before that, right? You can't do it on Saturday or whatever.
Right.
But yeah. However, I will say there is that mentality that you have to have of we're going come hell or high water from a promoter and a racer standpoint. But weather forecast and technology continues to get better. So Chris, you're a big technology guy. I mean, as they get more behind that and kind of get more accurate with it, can you rely on that more from a racer or promoter standpoint to make your decision?
we watch a lot more of it, and we watch areas, and I look at weather for the previous 3 to 4 days to try to create trends and watch it, but still, so many things affect it. So it's like if you go to Gateway, you can look at rain across the river at Gateway and totally go north of the track and make a circle and not hit the track at all. But all the forecast shows it's going to be 100% there.
They had some weather at Gateway this past weekend and the previous weekend. Took the stands out, and then this weekend it looked like some kind of Wizard of Oz scene blowing through the pits.
We just had storms here. Well, Chris knows, but through Missouri for the past month now? Something like that.
It's tough because that's one of the things is it's like all these things are challenging and you're faced with all this stuff putting on events, but you're in so many ways beholden to the forecast. Like the forecast doesn't even have to be correct. No. But if the forecast is calling for rain Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you're scrambling come Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Me and Wes have a buddy that actually chases storms, and the whole community around here, like in northern Missouri, follow him on Facebook, and he's more accurate than the weather station.
I mean, is that not a snapshot of modern media, though?
Yeah,
in a way, it's kind
everybody
of a snapshot of modern media.
Like
you can't
you don't go to KTVO.
Fox, no,
you go. Man, let me go check Aaron Pippen's post real quick.
I mean, if you check,
but that guy's boots on the ground, though. The meteorologist he's 300 miles away inside a room with no windows. And that guy's boots on the ground. But Wes, back to your promoter deal, you really have to watch this because your income is totally based on that weather forecast. It has all the racers are going to be there. They're hardcore, just like Mike was just talking. It's the do or die. We're going. But that's not what pays the bills. That's not why everybody's there. The people sitting at home, they watch that forecast and, it's supposed to rain. I'm not driving an hour.
It's the truth, man.
Yeah,
I mean,
we felt that
they
at our
start making
events.
other plans.
I mean, pack Speedos and then just send it.
Yeah.
Scott, I remember being in Indy one year and it was like pouring raining sideways. And I went by to see Scott Palmer. He was there racing Top Fuel. And I go in his trailer and I think it was him and Bobby Lagana had a few cocktails and they had cut grooves in their slicks, made some aqua treads. And they're like, we'll run in the rain. Let's light them up.
Too.
Yeah, I guarantee you Scott Palmer would make a lick in the rain, no doubt. But you are so beholden to what those meteorologists have to say. And it is funny because like in this world we live in right now, there's this huge divide between like kind of corporately owned media and these. It's weird because the barrier to entry is so different now. Like if you think about like using our cousin, like he's actually a cousin of mine, Aaron Pippen, our friend that's the local storm chaser up in Northeast Missouri. Like he has nothing to gain from like he has to be right? Because like if his YouTube channel or if his social media following, if he was wrong, storm after storm after storm after storm, week after week after week, people would quit following him. Right. Yeah. But the mainstream media doesn't really live by those same.
They live in partly cloudy, chance of rain.
Yeah,
I've told you that before. I mean, like if I was a meteorologist, that's what I would do
every day.
Man. Every day.
Does this dude take photos or videos? Is that like the draw of his page, or it's literally a forecast?
He posts a lot of
the most
radar
of it,
graphs or whatever those things are called,
and then like, models and all this. Yeah, he goes.
Oh
over
yeah.
them. But,
what about
he does go live like when he's chasing.
What about Mark Reblis and he chases the
tornadoes,
the tornadoes and lightning, and
I don't
does
know,
it
Mark,
for the photography.
Didn't Mark like drive a Prius or something like that?
Oh no! Last I checked, Mark's got like a new Mercedes.
Yeah.
Well, it was
so
okay.
if you know Mark Reblis, he ain't driving around.
Okay.
No.
Whatever, a car.
Yeah.
I don't know how many storms you're going to chase or how close you're going to get.
Well, I think
he does
in a sedan.
That's an interesting thing though, because there's a whole business behind having stock footage of that shit when it happens. Like, so all these people, they're going out there trying to capture the best angles of this storm or the best photos of this lightning strike or whatever, so they can sell it to the news wire, so they can sell it to some National Geographic.
There was a reality show
or whatever
where photographers and videographers were doing that for crimes. You know, like they listen to the scanner, they go get the footage of it. And
they should have just called you and asked to get in on the crime.
I know, right?
You know what I mean? Like JT's like, hey,
what do you mean they're doing
Channel,
it for crimes?
I'm going to
what
be
are you talking
committing
about?
a crime tonight.
They literally listen to the scanner, and when they hear something going on, they're there. They're always in the way. The cops hate them. Yeah, there was a reality show about these guys.
I thought you said these
around.
guys were chasing the weather. It had something to do with crimes. And
well,
I'm like,
shit, if you could double dip, Mike, I mean, why not?
The best time to rob a bank is during a tornado.
Lightning strike kills the power.
I was doing donuts
the damn bank.
one time in this field in, where was it? Smithfield Lake. And somebody it was storming. It was
Nobody
pouring.
knows where Smithfield Lake is.
Yeah, whatever.
I love JT tells every story as everybody went to high school.
But somebody,
by Uncle Bob's house right down.
The cops came over the hill and caught me, but they thought that I was leaving. The lightning storm had set off the alarms at the local McDonald's. They thought somebody had broken in and tried to steal a bunch of shit. But anyway. I don't know where that was going.
Yeah, great story, T.
Riveting. Yeah,
cool. Riveting. Hey, your new nickname, Hamburglar.
Hamburglar. There you go.
Oh my gosh. Well, hey, so there's a ton of stuff going on in the sport of drag racing, as is the case. It really is. I feel like I say this a lot, but it's hard to believe. I was at lunch with Marty, and he was talking on the phone, race car talk, and he goes, "Man, the year's halfway over." And that is kind of hard. I mean, it's not quite there, but we are running up on the midway point of 2024. And it feels like the racing season has really just gotten underway. One of the things that there's so much to talk about here, but I do think that we have such a hardcore audience that follows this show. And I want to give a quick shout out to all of them. Remember, click like, click share, click subscribe, however you're consuming this content. Know that we appreciate you and know that we really can't do this without you. Like our mindset is to just create conversation. We feel people need to be talking about the sport of drag racing more than they are. And so we try to create these opportunities for people to share ideas and riff on things, good, bad, otherwise it doesn't really matter. We want it all. And we appreciate you guys being a part of this conversation every Wednesday afternoon. But Chris, just looking at the lay of the land right now, I mean, it's no secret that I'm a pro modified guy. I'm a door slammer guy. We're obviously very passionate about pro modified right now. We were having a team call this morning, our weekly team conference call. Mike, JT, everybody's on there, and we're all chatting about things that are happening in the sport. And I'm just curious, like, as someone who's been a part of this through the IHRA, the infancy, if you will, of pro mod, through its kind of where it really planted its flag. Mike, what would you say? That's like the late 90s, early 2000s, where pro modified became this quote unquote marquee attraction. Like, it always had a following and a cult like following at that, but it really arrived on the scene in a major way in the late 90s, early 2000s, when it was becoming more of a household name. And you bore witness to the rise of the ADRL. I mean, the XDRL, all these different variations of door slammer drag racing. You've been intimately involved with a multitude of NHRA Pro Mod teams, involved with PDRA teams that have competed at our own events, the World Series of Pro Mod. And you were, in many ways, my right-hand man at the World Series of Pro Mod in its first 3 years at Denver. I'm just curious, like, State of the Union shit. Don't do Biden, because that didn't go well. But like, if you want to do, like, actually, you can get all like cranked out and start rambling. I'd be cool with that. But what do you make of like the state of affairs in pro mod right now? Like, it feels like this brand of drag racing it feels like we're on the cusp of something really significant.
Pro mod's bigger than it's ever been. It is. Pro mod's where it's at. Just look at World Series of Pro Mod. How many people were there? How many cars were there? It's the most entertainment. Nothing against Top Fuel. Top Fuel's entertaining. Honestly, I feel Top Fuel's kind of run its course. It went through all of its phases. It's pluses and minuses, and it did its growth. And I'm not going to say it's on its decline, but it doesn't look really healthy right now compared to Pro Mod. When you can bring 60-something Pro Mod cars to the World Series of Pro Mods, which is probably, maybe a third of the legitimate cars in the country. That's a lot of cars for that level of motorsports. That's a lot of cars. And then you go into other countries, Australia, New Zealand, the Middle East, Europe, and you look at Pro Mod racing over there, and it's growing and growing and growing. Our business has in Australia, we've grown in the last 3 years, probably about 700% in Australia and probably about 300% in Europe.
No shit.
Yeah, Pro Mods, it's people want to watch it. They want to relate to the car, even though that some of these cars don't totally look like the 68 Camaro sitting in your garage. It still looks like a 68 Camaro, and you can say, I got one of those. It's kind of where Factory X is. If they treat it right, Factory X will become big just because people can relate, and you have to bring it to a level that people have some connection to it, some relation. Again, the 68 Camaro sitting in your garage, the 2018 Camaro that you drove there in, the Mustang you drove there in. I like the nostalgia cars, like say a 55 Chevy. Yeah, this guy's got, I got a 55 sitting at home. Look at this. This is my guy. He's got a 55, which is the car that Tony Wilson's driving right now. There's so much diversity. They don't all look the same. You don't know what they're going to do. You don't know if these things are going to set a new world record or end up, on their lid next to each other. It's a crazy show, and it's Pro Mod, I think, strong right now. I think it's where it's at, and I think if organizations keep pushing it, it will be the thing that remains the future for a long time.
Chris, where do you think that came from, the international influence of Pro Mod? Like, what was the jumping off point for that? Or what do you think has continued to grow that? Because really no class, we talk about Australia, and then, we were talking about what you're doing over there in Australia before we jumped on the show. Europe, it's pretty universal. Middle East, obviously had a huge run of Pro Mods over there and still does to some degree.
And it's still happening. Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, was it the Scotty Cannon deal when he went over there? Because it didn't start there. And I mean, it took hold at some point in the 90s or 2000s and has continued to grow. And what do you think started that and allows it to continue like that?
It seems like the Australia side of it, Australia, New Zealand, it kind of started off, and a guy like Camp Stanley would be the one to really answer this question best. Yeah. He's done it a lot, but it started off with the guys with all of the blown altereds over there. And then one of them decided, hey, let's put a body on this thing. Same blower motor, same kind of, Pro Modified came from our top sportsman and top alcohol ranks. And it was a blending of that. And that's how it started over there. But as far as how I feel about Europe and the Middle East, it came from them wanting to do the things that Americans do. I've been fortunate enough to travel all over the world, and the rest of the world, like it or not, they want to be American, and they like American things. They love our freedoms. We have more freedoms than any country in the world. We have a better lifestyle that we dictate ourselves than any country. So as far as Middle East and the Middle East and Europe, when I started going to the Middle East in, I think 2007 or 8, somewhere in there, it was all Americans going over there. They were buying a car over here. They were bringing Americans over there. We were running the operations and then putting a Middle Eastern driver in it. And then it evolved into they were buying cars, different teams, Middle Eastern drivers, getting some Middle Eastern crew in there, and then having an American tuner come in. And then it evolved into they were doing it all themselves. We just kind of held their hand. But that influence strictly came from America. I think like the Australian, New Zealand stuff kind of evolved a little bit like Pro Mod did here. It just, once they saw it happen over here, it grew faster over there.
It's the universal language of our sport. Like I've said that, 1,000 times over the years, but I think it's the relatability factor. And I also feel like I had this conversation with a longtime watcher of the show and a dear friend of ours, Jim Parks, that was talking about being there or being wet. And he said something to me that it's like the highest level of grassroots racing. Yeah. And I think sometimes Chris and you and I have talked about this before in the past, that it's like drag racing has had something of an ongoing identity crisis, right? Like we never knew quite what we wanted to be. Right. Like, we've seen NHRA over the years, like do these things to emulate NASCAR and to emulate other happenings in motorsports and whatnot. And I understand the reasoning. Like, I think it's valid. Like, I'm not making this comment to like bash them. I'm just saying that I do think at its core, drag racing is a sport that was built on the back of rebels and outlaws and do-it-yourselfers and grease monkeys and gearheads. And Pro Modified is kind of this owning of who we are. Like, it's not trying to be something we're not. We're gunslingers. We're outlaws. we're gun. That's, and I just think that there's some sort of lightning in a bottle thing that has happened. Because even like you're talking, I mean, if you don't love living in America, you've never lived in any other country.
No.
I mean, if you go to those countries, almost everything they do is like in a step towards being more Western, being more Americanized. So they idolize our culture in many ways. And I think that's what it is. It's like James Dean was cool. Elvis Presley was cool, right? Rolling your shirt sleeve and, wearing the black jeans and having a pack of smokes. Like that is the embodiment like of what pro mod is. It's like the picture. If someone asked me to put the best foot forward for drag racing to a completely unknown person or whatever, I'm going to put them in front of a pro mod. Like, because I think that the characters, the cars, and what you lack in star power, like one of the things that we run into with the World Series of Pro Mod specifically is a good amount of the people that we bring in for the World Series don't have a ton of experience in front of a camera. Well, the beauty of Pro Mod is what they lack in sizzle or character, their car may make up for. You know what I mean? Because the cars still have a personality. They still have the crazy paint jobs. They maybe still have the old school body style or the latest. It may be a technology thing. Like I used to always, in the IHRA heydays, in my mind, it was the black hats are the blower guys. They're the bad guys. And the good guys, the white hats, are the nitrous guys. So like you didn't have to be some huge personality or some super verbose individual to kind of have a flag to wave, because the car did it for you. So I look at this whole landscape and I go, there's no denying that Pro Mod has reached a new level of expense. Like it's as competitive as it has ever been. It's not a cheap endeavor. However, Marty and I were talking about this at lunch. Like it is still attainable. However, like it is still not beyond the realm of reality that I think some of the traditionally seen highest levels of drag racing have become. I mean, to run Top Fuel or Funny Car at even a modest level, it far surpasses the budget of a high level Pro Mod team.
Yeah. And I want to touch back on something that you said a minute ago about organizations, emulating NASCAR and trying to follow that. The one thing, and I'm going to give you guys a pat on the back. If you try to follow that, how are you ever going to exceed what they did? If you follow their business model to the letter, how are you ever going to exceed what they did? You're not. So things like the World Series of Pro Mod, it's a different vibe. It's a different feeling. It's a different structure. And you got guys fighting to get into that thing. I have customers that were like, I'm going to say ruined their year because they didn't get invited. And so what kind of energy is that? But that's a different business model than what the traditional NHRA, IHRA, NASCAR is. And then another thing is those guys that don't have camera experience, that's what the fan wants to see, because that's them. That's them on a different level. That's not what they feel. And John Force has probably done more for drag racing than any single person as far as jumping on TV and throwing out all the sponsors' names and everybody and getting everything right. But people at home feel like that's scripted. And when you get you just pick like a Doug Winters or something, and he jumps out the other end and he just beat Ricky Smith, oh my God, that's a huge deal. And he's going to say some things that maybe don't come out right, but the guy at home's laughing because he's with him. He's in on it.
I agree. I wholeheartedly. And I think that that's kind of, again, the magic of this whole thing. Like I really, as I sit here today in this 8th day of May, 2024, I can't help but feel a little bit like it's time for whatever is next. Like, because the example that I have, and I'm not trying to like pour dirt, and it's going to be hard because I know people are going to try to read between the lines or whatever. So I'm not like trying to throw dirt on, nitro racing. I'm really not. I do think that there's perhaps a place for it for the foreseeable future. But what gets me out of bed is growing. Like Tony Robbins, everybody knows I'm a big self-help and self-improvement guru, right? I read all these silly books and take all the classes and whatnot. And Tony Robbins always says that a tenet of human happiness is progress. And I know that's the truth for me. Like if I'm having bad days and they're stacking up, like if I'm having, everybody's due a bad day, right? But if I'm having 2, 3, 4, 5 in a row where I just don't feel right, it's because I'm not progressing on something. And I have to like face that, because I'm going, okay, Wes, what in your life are we not making progress on? Because that's what makes a bad day for me. And I think that if I apply that to the sport of drag racing, I'm going, man, we've had 70 years. We've had 70 years of doing it the way we've always done it. Top Fuel and Funny Cars, king shit. And you can't sell tickets if it doesn't burn nitro. Blah. We've done that. And where are we now? Again, I think there are plenty of people, and I've had this conversation with racers before, where they're like, well, hey man, I'm getting by and blah, blah, blah. Who wants to get by? Right? Like, what is exciting is I want to create a world where I talked to Darren Beaner's daughter the other day, Victoria Beaner. She's 12 years old. She's a junior dragster racer in the PDRA and essentially a touring pro. And her parents have told me we are pot committed to helping her become a professional drag racer. And if I had to like close my eyes to everything, like whatever potential or future exists, I'm worried for her.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that a pathway really exists for her to go from junior dragster to super comp to top dragster to top alcohol to top fuel and have it ever be like in her best interest. Right? Because I think every step along the way, you'd be like, hey, you should probably get a job.
Yeah, that's the case now. I mean, we've talked about that a lot, to where the NPK thing, in our eyes, in the Street Outlaws show, is really the only way that these people are able to make a career. We've posed this question to like Lyle Barnett, to a couple other people. Alex, I think if you had the choice of what path to go to have a sustainable career in drag racing, as a driver, as a racer, where would you go? And it used to always be toward these pro ranks, but that hasn't been the case. And then of course you have like, us on the media end, Chris on the manufacturing and tuning end or whatever. But from an actual racer standpoint, that hasn't existed in the professional ranks for a long time. Even pro stock, look at pro stock. That used to be kind of the last place where you saw some of that. But now even it's completely, there's no funding out there that sustains one of these operations without the money being brought to the table. So it's like a reverse career. You got to have your career somewhere else and bring the money to the sport. So again, it's what you guys are saying. It's something's got to change on that.
JT's made this point since I met him. Well, or since he's been involved with Drag Illustrated, he has been frustrated by the fact that like the most talented people are not often the people that are in cars, because they don't have the resources that some of these very well-to-do thrill seekers have. And like, if I really look at our sport right now and like if I had to explain it to an alien, or if I had to like pitch a business to somebody like for future growth, I mean, the NHRA, it would seem to me that they are almost singularly reliant on the next billionaire thrill seeker. Like they need another super rich guy to be into cars. Like, and that is not, in my opinion, like a growth plan. Like maybe you can sustain on that.
It's hard for a fan to
get behind that.
Well,
because they
really
want to cheer on the dude that made it come up the hard way.
Like Earnhardt, was out there ramming people, and he wanted to win. I could make a case that I don't know if parity is all that great for drag racing for the fans. I want to see someone work, the guy that's working harder. I do. The guy that's working harder and it's a better driver. I want to see him go out there and whip everybody's ass. Yep. I do. I mean, why drag these other guys back just because that guy worked harder?
Honestly, at the highest ranks of our sport, I mean, we could call Don Garlitz right now, and he would tell you that like a whole lot of the success and failure at the top level of drag racing currently is how hard you're willing to run your shit. Like, right. Are you willing to put a new bullet in it after every run? New clutch pack, new everything.
He was big about less track prep too, so that you could see who's the badass tuner who can get that car down. We almost need to make them harder to drive.
I mean, honestly, and Chris, you can talk to this with the No Prep Kings. You got a ton of customers in that space. I got a lot of guys. One of your guys, Sean Ellington, Murder Nova, had a big won his first invitational a couple of weeks ago at the NBK race. There's a part of that as well that I think is we've tried to like band-aid it in a lot of different ways. Like I remember when the track prep thing happened, Chris, we had front row seats to this new expectation of track prep, like almost seemingly overnight. The Traction twins, Cale and Cody Crisp, their father, Larry Crisp, arrived on the scene at ADRL, and overnight the track prep expectations changed everywhere in our sport. And it felt like that was like a step in. It felt like something of a Band-Aid. Like, hey, we're going to guarantee that all the cars are going to go down. We're going to have less wrecks. We're going to over prep the track. But I don't know that that was exactly what came from that, because we actually had the track so good that guys were shaking the tires and driving into the walls and all this type of stuff. So what I see is some sort of balance having to be established, where it's like, what has happened, in my opinion, Top Fuel, Funny Car, and you know what, Bob Tasca may be willing to give us some details on this, because, and we'll see if Bob is willing to talk about the nuances of these things, because he's a guy that, you know, has resources, has major corporate America sponsors, but also doesn't just have an endless bankroll for his racing program. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, he talked about, you know, they used an outside source, Wilson Manifolds, to flow their intake manifolds because they didn't have a flow bench at their shop. So I wonder, I just feel like it's gotten the scales of justice, so to speak, are so far out of whack for what it takes to run one of those cars versus the potential upside. Like, there is no way to win enough or be successful enough in that level of racing, specifically Top Fuel or Funny Car, to offset what you spent to do
it. Yeah, not even a break even. And Pro Mod, you know, you can back up to about any level outside of Super Gas, and that's true. Top Sportsman, Pro Mod, any of the comp, you couldn't win enough if you won everything to break even. It's back to, you know, one of the things that really touch people, or that lets Pro Mod touch people, is the fact that, you know, 75% of those cars, the name that's on the door of the car is owned by the name that's on the window. And so that's still a connection. And it's just gotten to be so, you know, we with the track prep and make it so that makes the cars faster. The tracks get better and makes the cars faster. You spend more money, you blow up more stuff. And it's made the prices go crazy on this stuff. The budget to run, you know, current NHRA Pro Mod car or Top Fuel car, you know, Pro Mod, if you want to win a championship and you want to have really good stuff, you know, you're going to spend $750,000 easy if you already own everything. And how's that obtainable to people? You have to give them something that they can reach. But back on your track prep thing, you know, when Cale and Cody and Larry first came to ADRL and they started doing it, the only thing that and those guys are really good friends of mine, the biggest thing that came out of it was just consistency. But it did take the tuners away and the drivers away, because of that consistency. I used to love whenever on Sunday or Saturday night, whatever race day was, when you walked up there and there was a 3-foot long bald spot. I mean, it makes my mouth water because it's like, oh, this is my day, because majority of the people can't deal with that. That's more of what we need to see. And that's No Prep Kings has kind of dove into that a little bit. One thing that is not good for your race operation is glue on the racetrack. One thing we found at No Prep Kings was because they don't use glue on it, the track doesn't degrade as much with the sun. It's closer at night than it is to the day than we see on a typical track that has a lot of spray on it or a lot of glue on it. It's let those guys become really consistent and really fast. No Prep Kings right now, if you unload your car and you can't run a 370 something off the trailer, you're going to save money by loading it back up and not even run it the rest of the weekend. I mean, it's just, it's gotten, and it's gotten crazy. You know, motors are, a team that I'm dealing with, we just bought a couple of new motors from Proline. And, you know, you're talking by the time no turbos on them or anything, with injectors in them and stuff, you're $130,000 just for a long block and an intake manifold. And I mean, Mike can tell you this. We went through phases with billet intake manifolds on nitrous cars that we'd pay $40,000 for an intake manifold.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's crazy to hear those combinations catching up, because nitrous cars have always been, well, in the six figures for years now. But now you're, the latest and greatest Pro line, boosted stuff is up there as well. You have to have a limiting factor. I think that's kind of what we're saying on all levels here, whether it's fuel, whether it's prep, the no prep kings, even at World Series of Pro Mod. I think it's no secret that the pro race, what they had to do to that track to get it ready for the fuel cars, to basically de-radialize it or de-pro-modize it after, because that's all that's run at Bradenton for the most part. The work they had to do to get that track bare and then kind of build it back up to what they needed. And then us coming in 3 weeks later for World Series of Pro Mod, that was a little bit of a different track condition than what those guys were expecting and what they normally get at Bradenton. And we heard a lot of complaints about it, and a lot of people weren't happy about it. But at the end of the day, like you're saying, Chris, for an event of that stature, it almost helps to further separate the men from the boys, and the tuners and the drivers from the riders and the whatever you want to see. Like Quain Stott used to have rider on his window when we went to automatic transmissions. But I see it as a positive in that kind of situation, instead of always expecting perfect track prep.
And tie that into what JT said a minute ago, that helps create your parity, because you don't know who's going to win. And it falls back to tuner stuff. It falls back to, one combination may be really fast. Look at different combinations at World Series of Pro Mod, man. Night session rolls around and boom, one combination jumps right to the top of the page. But then you go to race day and that combination's not really where it's at. And having that what I'm going to call track diversity in the track, because at World Series the track changed up considerably day to day and night to day. I liked it. I enjoy that. It lets people like me focus more on what I do and shine a little bit, versus a guy that can just go buy a car, buy a tune-up, buy 6 different run files, and hey, if the track's this temperature, put this one in it. If it's this temperature, put this one in it. And that's what we've got to get back to that, because I think that's where we lose our fans. I think we lose our fans again. That's that connection. That guy, he knows if it's just a money game, there's no way he can ever get there. If it's just money, he can never get there. He can't get the sponsor. He can't have a nice enough car to attract the sponsor. He can't afford it. But if he knows that he can put in his hard work and learn and evolve and adapt and get somewhere, it motivates him, keeps him going.
I couldn't agree more. And like, that was probably one of my favorite things about the way the World Series of Pro Mod played out in 2024 earlier this year. Like Derek Ward winning that race with a decades old G-Force car. And there's no shot against G-Force. This is just a car that's been around for almost 20 years. And for me, that is a positive. Like, because when I looked at it from afar, I'm going, okay, this is a great story that a guy's got a 20-year-old race car
and the heaviest car on the property.
The heaviest car on the property
due to the rules,
and he just won the race in dominating fashion. Like, he did a fantastic job. But that was where you're right, Chris. Like, it was ingenuity and thinking outside of the box and taking chances and doing a good job driving. Like, all those things came together, and it wasn't a matter of just going out there and who's willing to spend the most. It wasn't a competition of wallets.
We've actually, Jason Manger, I think that's how you say his name in here. He's a crew guy on Barry Mitchell's Big Dog car. And Big Dog, that's another limiting factor. If you go there to Piedmont Dragway, I've talked about that a lot. It's a good track. They've done a lot with it. It's got all, safety, everything you need, but it's narrow, it's small, it's not very well lit. You got to kind of have some of these factors when you want to differentiate and have something different. If you went to a Big Dog race and was held at a facility like Galat or something, it would not be Big Dog. It would be, might be a good show, might be really cool, every now and then, but it wouldn't have that gritty feeling that Big Dog has.
And I think that's a big part of it.
And that's what the people love. They all remember, every one of us we have a memory of that first racetrack we used to go to when we were 16, 15, 14, whatever. And it was a little bitty racetrack. It had steel guardrails, and it had, some of them you backed into the water box. They were little bitty hole in the wall tracks.
Yeah, if you had to pull through and back into the water box, that's your first.
My kind of spot. Yeah, my kind of spot, friends.
Everybody just chuckled at that because they just had a memory of that. They had a memory of one of those racetracks, and that's how you keep those people engaged. You have to. That's why that Big Dog Series is so big. I mean, it has a huge following, and people spend a lot of money to go run that little series. It's good for pro modified. To back up earlier, what you were talking, Wes, about Top Fuel, and I think Top Fuel needs pro modified for Top Fuel to make its next step. I think they have to keep the focus has been on them so much, it's just wore out. The media's wore out, the people are wore out, everybody's wore out on it. Top Fuel needs pro modified to get that energy back, and it will create that energy again in Top Fuel. The best thing for them to do, one of them teams take a little bit of their budget and go buy a pro mod car.
That's what I want. Yeah. And I mean, it's like, that's like my North Star is a Chili Bowl-esque type of event that happens where everybody, like, I was literally having this conversation with Marty at lunch, like the UFC, they can't have Ronda Rousey fight Conor McGregor. They're in different weight classes. One's a guy, one's a gal. Like it doesn't work on a multitude of levels, correct?
Right.
We can do that shit.
Yeah.
We can have Erica Enders race against Ricky Smith, race against Travis Pastrana, race against Cletus McFarland. We can put all the big characters on a level playing field. And I think that to me is like the magic. And if you kind of carrying on this Top Fuel versus Pro Mod thing, like I keep going back to that shirt that 00 Shit Show sells that says the Pro Mod is greater than Top Fuel. I love that. I need to get one to wear on this show every single week. But it's like, and I have to be careful because I have a lot of dear friends that race in Top Fuel and run nitro cars. And I'm obviously a big fan of it. And I will forever
got
be
one of them coming up. Get all this out one of them before Bob gets on here.
But they need to embrace that. They need to see that they can see what the dwindling car counts, and how I want to kind of put that together. Dwindling car counts. Maybe the car counts don't dwindle, but the team owner counts dwindle. So, you divide it up now amongst 4 team owners, whatever there is over there. I don't even know right now. Used to be if there was 20 cars, there was 18 team owners.
Yeah.
And now every team has 6 cars, 4 cars, and nothing against Richard Freeman and everything that's going in Pro Stock, but you're seeing the same thing in Pro Stock. They roll out there with 7 cars, 8 cars, 10 cars. But the fuel guys need to help embrace, they need to look down, below them at Pro Modified and say, this is the future. These are the people. You can't tell me it wouldn't blow the internet up if next year at World Series of Pro Mod, Bob Tasca and John Force weren't sitting on the starting line, one in a 68 Camaro and one in a 67 Mustang Pro Mod car.
Yeah.
The internet would explode.
Don't give away our plans, man.
But dude, I'm telling you, Chris,
that's
like
what we said all along, though, right? About
that. I mean,
that's what we wanted.
That's what we need. Like our sport needs all the stars in one place. Yeah. Like, and we've had a lot of those conversations. I've asked those questions of Clay Millican, Antron Brown. The list goes on. Like, hey, what has to happen? Like, what do you guys need on your side of the fence? Because one of the examples is, our old buddy Keith Berry. I think everybody on here is good friends with Keith Berry. Everybody knows Keith Berry. Yeah. And I remember when Keith got out of Radio versus the World Racing, the first question JT asked him was like, dude, if you don't want to spend that much or you don't want to race that much, why not run like X275 or Pro 275? And he couldn't stand the thought of stepping down. Remember that, T?
Yeah.
He couldn't stand the thought. Couldn't, and this, I'm not like bagging on Keith. He's one of my close friends, but he's like, he has to rebuild every year. He thought, yeah, he's like, I can't do that. I can't step down to a class. And it's like,
it has to not be seen as a step down.
And that's what I'm saying.
Like that's what these guys, if they got a hold of it and really drove one of these cars, maybe we can ask Bob about this. My dad actually tells this story from the 90s. He was at a race. I think it was a Super Chevy or something like that in Atlanta, and they booked in John Force for a match race. And John Force came over to my dad's pits and said, "Let me sit in that thing," and got in my dad's car and was kind of, hitting the buttons and messing with the linko and stuff. He said, "To hell with this thing. There's too much shit going on in here." He wanted to get back in his deal that he, is no easy task to drive, but there's far less to do, far less going on. And I mean, you have to kind of look at it from that perspective as a challenge. It's not as violent or as forceful as fast, but it's a challenge in its own right.
But like my ultimate takeaway from that is, and I apologize, but there's 2 points I'd like to make. First and foremost, the UFC, and I know I make these combat sport comparisons all the time and people probably grow tired of them, but I think there's so many parallels that it's important to explore. They stopped contesting super heavyweight because they just couldn't find enough qualified, able-bodied athletes over 265 pounds to fight at a high level. Like, they could get a couple of big old boys to go in there and exhaust themselves and sweat all over one another, but they couldn't get high level competition because there just weren't enough of them. And I can't help but feel to some extent that Top Fuel and Funny Car may be something of UFC's super heavyweight category. Yep. Where it was great when it existed. It was fantastic, but times change, I heard Bob Dylan say. And it's like, I think that the winds of change are blowing, that it's like we're at a time right now where I think that there are, the accessibility of pro mod is, I think, there's a million different ways to go about it. You can do your own thing. You can be part of a team. You can rent a ride. There's a lot of different ways to skin that cat. You can lump it all together with a group effort. You can do all those different things, but I really can't help but feel like there is some writing on the wall that says maybe light heavyweight's the next big thing. Right. And and we have to kind of change the narrative that exists in the sport that to be king shit, you've got to run Top Fuel. I think that story can change over time.
Well, it's characters too. I mean, like the characters that are in the car. I mean, you can lean on that in whatever you choose as your top dog, as your top sport. But those characters is that's what's going to build the popularity of the brand. I mean, look no further than you just said, the UFC and Conor McGregor. I mean, because they hit that lull where they didn't have very many characters for quite a while. And it suffered for a little bit, and then
don't you feel NASCAR is going through that right now?
They did, especially when they lost all their top drivers. And
they're developing
a good example,
new stars.
Though the Conor McGregor thing, that's actually a good example. I think your average person knows who that is and knows he's a UFC fighter. They would think he's a heavyweight champion because that's the first thing that goes in your mind. You wouldn't realize that he fought at multiple weight classes below that. Yeah,
I mean,
but they embraced that
at one point in time.
UFC embraced that, even though he was a much smaller guy. But it's kind of to your point, Wes, that it's in our minds, like the Tyson and all that, like those heavyweight days, you had to be the heavyweight to really garner that kind of attention. But they shifted that focus when they saw this is the guy, this is the character.
Because all of that is secondary.
Latch on to.
It's all secondary. I mean, I look at what Cletus McFarland has done down in Bradenton with the Freedom Factory. I mean, they sell thousands of pay-per-views. They sell, and perhaps tens of thousands of pay-per-views. They sell, which I understand in the grand scheme of things is barely scratching the surface. But the point remains is that it's done on the back of influencers. It has very little. I mean, these guys come down there and gals to race 500,000-mile Crown Vics in a circle that are spray painted. It has nothing to do with the car. Like, it's so secondary to the personality. And I guess that's a fantastic segue because I think we have let's get in the green room right now. We've got a limited time with this guy. He's very busy. He texts me before the show and he says, "Listen, Wes, I have very little time to screw with you." Very little. That's what he said.
Fair warning. I try that
every morning.
I try that, but I just get blown off when I say
He did. He said, "I have very little time to screw with you. I'm busy. I've got important shit that I'm doing." No, I'm just joking. But Bob Tasca III, I honestly think Bob, he is embracing this role right now. I don't know. It's the universe has kind of. I've wondered, like, what happens in the NHRA, and I'm switching gears dramatically here, but like, who's up next? And when I look in this sport right now and I look for someone to fill the void that John Force will ultimately leave, like, we cannot operate as if this man's going to be here forever. And if I mention this guy's name, Bob Tasca, people latch on. And I think that he has, I don't know, it's the character, it's the look, it's the voice, it's the accent, it's all these different things. But Bob has really he's embraced the character of Bob Tasca, and I'm excited to have him on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for the fastest the fastest man in drag racing. 341.68. I'm getting shirts made. They'll be available soon. I'm going to get it tattooed on my arm later this week. The fastest man in the world, Bob Tasca. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, very good. It's great to be on. I don't know about all the things you said, but the one thing you did say that's 100% correct is I am the fastest man in the world on a dragster. That's for sure. What a run. What a moment. We are going to do it again. We've been right there. We should have did it in Gainesville, but it rained out. We should have did it in Charlotte with that borrowed manifold from Torrance. What people don't realize is we actually dropped the hole at 750 feet. It ran 338 on 7 cylinders, eating itself up. You know, had it not done that, we were actually running a little ahead of the 339, a little behind of the 341. So we got a really fast car. Excited to be heading out to Chicago and seeing if we can do it out there.
Well, we're headed into the summer months, and we may not have the record-setting conditions that we will have later this fall. But you did say something in Charlotte, like that car will run 340 or better before the end of the season. And I guess there's a lot of stuff to cover, but Chris Bell, our co-host today, longtime tech aficionado. He was actually the World Series of Pro Mod tech coordinator for 2017, 18, and 19. He's had a ton of experience. He's the owner and proprietor of Kinetic Engineering, who makes a world leader in shock technology, and is a great person to have on here to talk about just the rules and intricacies of this. I got to be honest, like the video you posted on Twitter, or X, excuse me, Elon, X a couple of weeks ago, I was really just, I loved the way you embraced the situation you were facing. The NHRA had, and this is something that I think the NHRA has struggled with. Like if we're going to be a major league sport, we have to do major league shit. And that is face the music at times. And I thought it was incredible the way that you were so willing to just embrace this moment of seeming controversy, I guess you will. And I guess I don't want to beat a dead horse. And I'm sure that to some extent you're probably tired of talking about this, but I do want to give you your flowers for like rolling right into that interview with Tony Pedregon and Brian Loans and talking about something that I can't imagine how uncomfortable it was, because the argument that I made for those that were like, oh, they're looking for advantage, they're trying to cheat, blah, 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 blah. It's like, we've got a guy here that has a lot to lose. And let's be honest, like, are the stakes so high in drag racing that he is willing to sacrifice the brand that has been built over decades of his family's efforts? I think not. I think if we look at this through a real meaningful lens, it would be pretty easy to see that that makes very little sense. Like there's no amount of NHRA wins that are worth this man's reputation, excuse me. And so I'm just, curious, where does all this stand? I mean, you roll into Charlotte, find out these manifolds that you were seemingly thought were approved by the NHRA powers that be in Gainesville apparently were not. You find yourself scrambling to borrow a manifold. Shout out to the Torrance gang, incredible people, Bobby Mark, they call it. You go over, get a manifold that's tried and true, slap it on. And it took 2 runs to be right back where you were. Like, can you just kind of share with us some of those moments?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was very disappointed with how NHRA handled it. I've said enough to wear myself out on this point, but we gave them the part. Okay, we flowed it. If there was any question on whether I thought there was a performance advantage with the manifold, I wouldn't have gone on national TV and basically articulate the whole story, knowing that if I got a stock manifold and put it on my car was going to run like shit. It would be like discredited everything on the planet that I've done, right? It would have discredited the 341 run. It would have discredited everything. The truth is, our car goes fast because my guys work really, really hard, okay, on a lot of different things, all within the rule book. We look at every part. We flow every manifold, okay? There was a process. I wasn't even aware of it. They run sand through it. It cleans it out. It roughs it up. And it has absolutely zero performance advantage, which we proved. I mean, if there was any vindication, it ran 338. The only thing I sweet Jesus, I wish you didn't drop that hole at 750 feet because it would have run 340. And that would have just been an epic ending to the day. But we won the race. We ran 338. We obliterated the track record, and we had a stock manifold. We got our manifolds back. They're going to recoat them. Alan Johnson, who makes the part, said there was absolutely no performance advantage. But you know, when you give them a part and they give it back to you, you assume that it's legal. Like, why do you give it back to us, right? And that was ultimately. I guess I would say it this way. They have a very tough job. I don't belittle anything that those guys do. I'm friends with most of them. Had we not given them the part in Gainesville that had the same color to it as the one that we ran in Charlotte, I'd have no beef because it was not the same color. It was a different color. And by the rule, any modification whatsoever, they can deem illegal. However, the spirit of the rule is safety and performance. The spirit of the rule is we don't make a part that is a better performance advantage or for some reasons not as safe. Because of that point, I was disappointed in how they handled it. At the end of the day, totally vindicated. My team, our car, there is zero question in anyone's mind, Wes, that what we did together in Bradenton will not be replicated again. Maybe this up, depending on what the temperature is in Chicago, it will be replicated again. We have already been on runs that were as good as that run, just didn't finish it. We will hit the summer. We may not get a shot after Chicago, quite frankly, and then we'll wait to the fall. But we're breaking speed records at almost every track we go to. And we got a really, really good car. And I give 100% of the credit to my team, to Aaron Brooks, Todd Okahara. They are incredible people to work with. We got a great race car, and we just, got to get to Chicago and get out there and show them what we can do.
I'm curious, like you talk about Aaron Brooks, someone I've known for a long time, Todd Okahara, same. These guys have been a part of multiple different teams, and it seems like they have found something of a home with you. What do you make? I mean, you've had a slew, you've had some personnel changes over the years, some of which were much talked about, and I think this is something that Chris would echo as well. Like, there is something to say for the harmonious relationship amongst all those people. Like, you've got to make all the mechanical pieces work together, but you also have to make all these human pieces work together. How much is that contributing to kind of the magic and mojo of this moment you have right now, Bob?
Well, it's no different than any other professional sport. You can see basketball teams have great talent that don't win. This is a team sport, chemistry. It's got to all click. To some extent, I feel like I caught lightning in a bottle, and you just want to keep it together. We're excited. We moved into a new shop. I'm acquiring Morgan Lucas's shop, so I'm investing long term in a facility that I own out there. Ford renewed us for a long term contract. I got PPG and BG that are with me. We just got a solid program. We got great performance. So ultimately, my role as an owner is to put our team in a position to win, give them the resources that they need to go out there and to do the best that they possibly can. Todd Okahara and Aaron Brooks have latched on to that opportunity. These are some of the hardest working guys that I know. The car runs 340 plus miles an hour, not because we're doing exactly what everyone else is doing. These guys are doing different things. How they run the car, they set the car up 100% within the rule books. Okay, but they are doing things different. And it's not one thing, Wes. It's the entire combination. And if I tell you things, people don't believe me. The car that ran 338 miles an hour in Charlotte was completely different than the car that won Las Vegas. Like, nothing the same. Not the engine, not the heads, not the manifolds, not the valves. It was 100% different setup. And this is the setup that we have in the car right now, is what Aaron Brooks calls it's the go fast setup. This is a more powerful car than we had in Bradenton when it ran 341. And it was funny because I said to Aaron and Todd, I said, why would you guys want to do this? Like, as the owner, like, why do you want to throw away everything that we've done and do that? We ran 341. He goes, Bob, I think it run 344 with this setup. And that's how this guy thinks. Like him and Todd, like people say, oh, they'll never work together. It's opposites and they won't last a season. These guys are feeding off each other, ideas, concepts. Let's do it. Let's test it. And you see it in our results. Obviously, we're not going to win every race, but we got a car that can go to every single event this year, and we have the ability to win it. And that's just a fact.
Chris, what do you make of that? Like, is that you love the thinking outside of the box notion from a tuner, and that right now we're kind of in a time of monkey see, monkey do, right? So like that, I'm not surprised to see that approach paying dividends for Bob.
Bob's 1,000% right. Just like we talked about a minute ago before he was on here, if you do exactly what everybody else does, how do you expect any different results? You have to think totally outside of the box. You have to keep your mind open. You have to not be, you can't get stuck in that box. You've got to look at ideas that maybe they appear dumb. And just like he kind of alluded to a minute ago, there's things about the car you could tell your competitor and they would think you're stupid.
Yeah.
Because it would never work, but it doesn't work without the whole package. It's just a mindset, and you've done a good job, Bob. It's tough putting a bunch of A-type personalities together and getting them to mesh and getting them to respect each other, and that's what happens in these really successful teams. And I've known Aaron probably since the mid '90s. Don't know him that we knew each other better then than we do now, but I watched him come up, and people like that are on their way up. They're not afraid to think outside. They're not afraid to try new things. And, let's try something stupid, because that will give you a direction, either the right direction or the wrong direction. But, from the checks that you write, there's a lot of decisions that they made that cost money that were not the right decision, but they were a stepping stone to the correct decision. And you can't be afraid to take that step.
No, and it's funny because Aaron, at end of the year, he wanted to buy this part, and it was very expensive. And I was kind of on the fence, and he's like, listen, if it doesn't work, I'll reimburse you. And that just tells you that. And I went up to him. I said, Aaron, I'm going to tell you one thing. I've never in my life had a crew chief tell me that ever.
No.
I said, Aaron, here's what I'm going to tell you. Go buy it. Buy two if you want them. And if it doesn't work, I'll never take a check from you. And it's just, that's the passion he has. And the great thing is Todd is the elder, been A to Z, funny cars, dragsters, and how they balance each other and work together is critical. I look at it in my business. I mean, I have cousins, a brother, and, GM partners around the country, and I'm fired up all the time. I mean, I'm on kill all the time. I'm pushing. And sometimes it's good to bounce, they'll bounce something back on me, they'll push back. And it's the combination of the personalities, the experience. That's what makes what we're doing special. And hey, listen, we're working hard. We're competing against, they call it the Big Four. It's the Big 16. I mean, you can get sent home by any single car in this field. And it's just a tribute to the quality of the product that we have on the racetrack. You saw the Vegas race, how close these funny cars are. You see the qualifying numbers. I mean, it's hard to win out there.
Oh, as hard as it's ever been, I would argue. And I think it's the most exciting part of it for me is I remember back way when we started the magazine, like almost 20 years ago, I remember having, getting emails and letters back then from people, that readers in the magazine, asking like, who's the next Alan Johnson? Like, who are the next crop of Bernie Federley or Austin Coyle and all these names that are kind of almost like religious figures in our sport at this point in time. It's exciting to see these guys getting this opportunity. Like to Chris's point, Aaron's been around for a long time. I mean, I think the first time I ever met him, he was tuning Melanie Troxel's car as part of the R2B2 camp.
People don't remember. He was not full-time. When I hired him, he didn't have a full-time job. Like people said to me, oh, you're crazy, gonna blow all your shit up. Todd had gotten let go on the dragster, was struggling there. And they're like, you just put two guys together. I had people tell me like, you were dumb, bad decision. You made your decision too quick. And I kind of laughed because I knew the two guys. Like, I didn't know Aaron that well, but I knew his mentality. I saw him race. I just loved that side of it. And I've known Todd Okahara for, 10 years. And I've worked with Todd, and the guy's brilliant. And I just believed in that moment, it was a tough time when those guys walked out on me. I said, something, I think these two guys could be spectacular. And hey, listen, get lucky, call it whatever you want. I saw something in the two of them that other people didn't see, because they would have hired them. I mean, they would have hired the guys before I hired them. And I'm fortunate, very fortunate to have them together. We know what we have is pretty special, and we just got to go out there and prove it every weekend.
What's the mood like amongst your team? It feels like, I said to start the show, that it feels like there's something of a target on your back, Bob. Like, I don't know. Part of me, like, selfishly wants to say it's all that 341 run from Bradenton, and it just put all this attention on you. And is he going to be able to follow that back up? But it does feel like you're something of this, like, totally obvious dark horse. Like, there's no reason to have ever discounted you. It's not like you've not been in the hunt. You've always been in the hunt. But it seems like times it's just different right now around. I mean, does that mood exist around your camp? Like, because it feels like you guys have a real opportunity here. I mean, obviously there's a lot of racing left to be done in 2024. Be there, no doubt, and things can change in a hurry. But it does feel like there is some serious momentum behind what the Bob Tasca team is doing right now. What do you make of that? Like, what's the mood? Does everybody kind of feel that sense of like, oh, we're about to show these folks, or is it business as usual?
Bob Tasca doesn't need any extra motivation. Neither does Aaron Brooks or Todd Okahara. And all these guys are doing is just motivating us. I mean, at the end of the day, the 341 run was a big statement. I mean, no one's ever done anything like that. We're breaking track records. We're running 8 mile an hour faster than the field on some weekends. They're all looking at what we're doing. And I'm sure NHRA is getting worn out by other crew chiefs in the pit chirping that we're doing something wrong. No question. I mean, that's a fact, right? So they're checking everything. They've checked everything on my car 3 times. I mean, name the part. Name the number of times they've taken our data. I mean, it's every time we do something. Honestly, we qualify second, but we set the speed record, and they spend more time tearing my car apart than they do the number 1 qualifier. And that's okay. I have no issue with that. And I really think, I didn't watch the whole thing. My son showed me a clip. Brian Lone said something. I got to actually watch it because they said it was good. But what Brian said, which I really respect, is I'm glad they're doing this to me. Because when we run 340 plus at an NHRA event, already did it, okay? It's already been done. The run has been made. We were witness to it. But when it happens in NHRA, so they feel good about it, because I think maybe they don't right now, what are they gonna check? Like, what is there left to check? Like, maybe I got to get down into my fire underwear and say, is there something on me? Maybe. But at the end of the day, there'll be nothing left for them to check. It'll be a run that I hope happens sooner than later. That will be pretty epic. And because we already did it. It was epic when we did it. It'd be epic when you do it again. And it's just a matter of time. So maybe that's the silver lining, is that when it happens, nobody can contest that there was ever anything ever done any wrong on my race car.
I can't wait personally, because it was, I have said this, I said it that weekend, that fateful weekend, the February 8th through 10th at Bradenton Motorsports Park. I said it on the Flow Racing live stream, and I've said it multiple times on this podcast, that I would argue that there has never been a drag racing event singularly that has invested more in the infrastructure, as far as making sure that everything that we could do to legitimize the competition on the racetrack had been done. Like, that was something that we talked about internally, that we can't we can't go through all this effort. We can't put out this level of energy and do what we're doing and have anything come into question. So like, I was so proud of the fact we got Bob Brockmeyer on the property from CompuLink. We got a brand new Christmas tree, all brand new sensors. Like, we did everything imaginable to make sure that whatever number popped up on that scoreboard, people couldn't question. And I knew that there would still be some air about it. And we're contending with that right now, right? But I'm with you. Like, I cannot wait till it happens, Bob, because like, I'll just get another tattoo on the other arm, I think.
Yeah, well, that'll be good. And so when you look at the run, all you have to do is look at our left front wheel. Like, the legitimacy of the run, we ran 338 in Dallas, 338 miles an hour. It's not like my car ran slow in 23, right?
Right.
It ran 338 in Dallas. It dropped a hole. When you overlay the 341 run, it's walking away from it. Like, it's walking away from the 338 run. And it's, it is what it is. But hey, listen, we're going to do it again. There's no question about it. We just need the right conditions, because clearly we're limited to traction. And, this is a night, even though we burn nitromethane, when the air gets cool, it makes more power. And it'll happen. Hopefully it might happen this weekend in Chicago. Depends on what the conditions are. And I get a present for you. You're getting a tattoo. I'm giving you something. When's your next when are you going to your next national event? Wes?
I'm going to Chicago.
All right, so you're going to Chicago. It'll be after. I won't have them until after.
I'll come see you in Chicago, and we'll
Chicago. I won't have them. I'll have them at Epping. Are you going to Epping?
Well, maybe I will have to now.
You'll have to
and that's in your backyard, right? You probably got 10,000 guests there.
We got a little special ceremony for the guys. And hey, listen, that was a special race. I'll never forget that pro event. It was a watershed moment, I think, in the sport for what we did as racers, the performance on the racetrack. And, we're looking forward to trying to put it together again.
I'm excited as well, man. Well, hey, Bob, thank you so much for the time. You're headed into Chicago. You're talking about Epping. I mean, tell us about the summer. I mean, is this there? We've seen teams get hot early in the season and then struggle to maintain that. How do you kind of balance that headed to the dog days of summer here? Do you guys go into sort of, I mean, obviously not afraid to test things, not afraid to try things, but I'm just thinking about this summer. How do you guys plan to utilize these summer months? Is it to step on their throats and get as much of an advantage as humanly possible and make your point come U.S. Nationals, or what does the strategy look like headed into the summer?
I think whenever you have a chance to step on their throats, that's what you want to do. For me, I break the season down to 3 parts. The fastest cars in the first 5 or 6 races, those guys run for the championship, period. Because when the conditions get good in the fall, if you can't run the low 380s, the mid 380s consistently, you will not have a real good shot at winning the championship. So we try to run as hard as we can first 5 or 6 races, get that data, put it in our pocket, survive the summer. That's basically, you got to survive the summer, take your licks when you get them, fire some shots off when you get a shot. But when the tracks get hot, it's an unbelievable equalizer. Anyone can beat anybody literally on any given Sunday. And then you roll back into the fall and it's throw down, baby. It's throw down. And you have to be able to run the big number to put your name up in the ring, to run with the procs and the heights. Well, the not height anymore, but the procs.
Yeah.
And caps, and you got to run with those guys when the conditions get good, and we can do that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the summer though. We knocked some races down, won some races last year in the summer, and we fully intend to try to do that again.
And it's a different environment. We were talking at the beginning of the show that oftentimes, like, it's great to have those mine shaft conditions and be able to throw down the record numbers, but it's also totally okay and acceptable to have to go out there and kind of do it the old school way, right? Where the track's marginal for everybody involved and it's hot and greasy out there. There's nothing wrong with that. But Bob, thank you so much, man. Congratulations. I got to tell you, we've got a comment here in the chat room. Bob's social media person is easily the best in NHRA, no competition. And I do want to tell you that your whole team is doing a fantastic job. Like, between the videos on social, hearing from you directly on social, just engaging fans, man. I think that we have a rabid fan base that really needs fed more. We find that here at Drag Illustrated, we can't really create enough content to feed this community, because there is a real void here. They want to know what their favorite racers are up to. They want to know what these movers and shakers in our industries are doing and what's weighing on them and what's keeping them up at night. So kudos to you guys for making those investments and doing it the right way. Our sport needs more thinking like that.
Well, thank you very much. Proud to be out there. Love racing. Love being around the fans. Love what we're doing. And we're going to try to do it again in Chicago. And don't forget to come by and see me in Epping. I got something for you. Thanks, brother.
I appreciate it, Bob. Talk to you soon, brother. Thank you very much. Hey, guys, while we have a minute here, I do want to remind you that each and every episode of the Wes Buck Show is made possible by way of our friends at Stroud Safety. Stroud Safety, manufacturers of 100% made in America safety equipment, from drag chutes and seat belts to blankets and fire suits, brand new boots. They've got a brand new head and neck restraint that is changing our industry. Make sure to log on and support the people that support us by going to StroudSafety.com. Tommy and Anita Cunningham, the whole team up there in Oklahoma City, dear friends of ours, and this show wouldn't be possible without them. Mike, JT, I don't know if we're going to get Chris back. I'm hoping a storm didn't hit him, but we've got a power outage in Cuba, Missouri. So if anybody's in Cuba, Missouri, we're thinking about you. We may get.
Let me call the meteorologist here real quick.
Call Aaron.
Actually, Mike's our in-house meteorologist.
I got some weather coming in. I just watched a huge lightning strike like right outside my window. I got some stuff rolling in here too.
Can you give it?
It's 94 degrees.
Mike, can you give us a little weatherman?
No, I'm not doing it. I'm not entertaining. I need to. If I had a green screen, I would.
We're gonna have to get you one.
Get me one.
Yeah.
Man, talking about Bob Tasca, dude, he has all of a sudden bloomed into one of the best personalities in NHRA. I think he always has been. He's been around it, obviously multi-generational racing family, but he was a little bit more reserved, and he was on here dropping the S-bombs and letting it fly.
Since the pro race,
he really
he's became one of my favorites.
He is, and I honestly think though that is he ran 341 and he's continued to run big speed and low ETs on the NHRA circuit. But I think the way that he is
talked
embracing,
to the crowd, like in the chip draw that night and stuff. I mean, he did a great job.
I think he's got a target on his back though, from his willingness to throw his weight behind that pro race. I mean, he was on the initial press conference we did. He was one of the most vocal supporters of it the entire time, leading up to and during the event, and after that too. He kind of went straight at NHRA about the 341. He had those T-shirts made, and he's been vocal when it comes to challenging NHRA and we've always done it this way model.
Real quick tech question for somebody who I know will give us the straight shit. The color of the manifold. Like, as someone, Chris, who knows the inner workings of all these things and has spent the crazy money getting manifolds made, is the extent of this conversation the dimensions were not changed, or do you think that running sand through it could potentially have had? What's your stance on it?
It depends on if you changed it dimensionally. If you didn't change it dimensionally, it's pretty irrelevant.
And they said it wasn't. So
what about changing the surface, the interior surface of the manifold with the sand?
It's way less important on a boosted car than it is on a nitrous car. You know, you remember, Mike, we used to put the dimples in the floor of the manifold with carburetors, and that's to pick the fuel back up. When the fuel and the air mixture is at 60 psi and traveling by at Mach 29, that small texture does zero. It absolutely does zero. What they were mad about is with NHRA, you cannot, the old saying of ask for forgiveness, not permission. You can't do that with them. Forgiveness does not work. You have to show them before the fact.
But he did. He did, though.
And the thing is, they did. But then, if you don't get everybody involved in one room to say, yes, that's okay, their out will be, well, I didn't see it. Well, so-and-so approved it. Well, I didn't see it. We didn't all see it. And I mean, I hate to say this. I'd love the guys at NHRA, but they've done that for the last 30 years. When I was at Ace, the clutch company, we fell into that same deal. There was a clutch that they said, oh, it's not legal. Oh yeah. Danny Gracia said it was. Yep. I didn't. Graham said, no, I didn't. I didn't see it. Well, do you want to look at it? No, I don't want to look at it. Have Danny look at it. So what did that accomplish? It was, and so then Danny made the ruling of it was legal. We were at Seattle, made the ruling that it was legal, but he'd already told me it was legal. The problem is, like, we just didn't notify Grant.
It's an interesting thing. And I kept coming back to the fact that, like, I remember this, like, at my dad's repair shop, Buck Brothers, Sunny Slope, Kirksville, Missouri. Like, we're I can't even remember what we were working on. Oh, I remember what we were working on. And we were trying to build a set of headers out of like 6 sets of Jeg shorty headers for my little S10 pickup truck that had an angle plug-headed small block Chevy in it. So we were really struggling to get a set of headers that would work. So we were trying to make our own. And I was like pitching all these questions to my dad. And I'm a dumbass kid. Like, I'm like 16, 17 years old. I'm like, well, isn't this going to hurt flow and blah, blah. We need exhaust flow. We're going to have all these kinks in these headers trying to get around these spark plugs. And he's like, just jet. Well, he was like, just jet the nitrous up. Like, whatever it hurts, just jet it up. And I kind of, like, on a grand scale, when you've got a fuel pump that flows 100 gallons per minute, I don't know how much difference some rough texture on a manifold runner is gonna really make.
An 80 grit versus a 40 grit surface, when it's moving that much fuel and that much air, it doesn't do anything. It's zero.
I mean, I could understand it on like a 4-cylinder comp eliminator engine, right?
Naturally
aspirated. Everything matters, right? We're going to be down on the flow bench at Rear Morrison for weeks on end building manifolds, right? I mean, if you go to Rear Morrison Racing Engines right now, one of the purveyors of the finest pro stock engines that were ever made, right? They've got a section of the shop that is totally dedicated to manifolds that didn't make power. Like, if you look around, there's all these sheet metal manifolds everywhere. It's terrifying. And you're like, what's that one? And they're like, made 4 horsepower less. You know what I mean? Like,
have they even said that it changed the texture? Because I was thinking that they said it didn't.
No, well, we just heard about the dimensions.
We heard online.
Yeah. I wonder if it's simply the fact that they were using like a non-traditional source, because Wilson manifolds is not, common in the fuel ranks, right? That's more of a, door car, pro stock, pro mod stuff. Boosted stuff. And I wonder if that was like the red flag or what really drew their eye to it.
I guarantee that was you didn't ask permission.
Yeah.
You didn't tell us you were going to use them. Why do we see that name on it? Why are we seeing how come they touched it? But from what
they're known for being, cutting edge and finding power with stuff like that.
But it could be, it could be as little as how the O-ring fits on the head. Is this O-ring 6,000ths thicker than the other O-ring? So when it compresses, it leaves a 3,000ths gap between the head and the manifold. That would make a bigger difference than a very light shot peening or very light blasting. What I heard was it wasn't even a texture change. It was as produced, it's a billet looking finish, which is a borderline polished aluminum look. And it was a flat finish. And
I mean, it just goes to show you. And I think that what Brian and we lost you there momentarily. I hope the storms are going to pass, Chris, but
they're gone now already.
Okay. We're good. We're in the clear. Typical drag racing weather. Yeah. But he said that Brian Loans had stated, and I haven't seen this, but I agree with the premise that we're glad, right? Like, I mean, I think that if a guy is performing, it's there was a comment here from Jim Parks, like Dale Earnhardt's car was the most inspected car during his winning years, and he kept winning. And I think that will really be the story of, and that was probably the significance of what Tasca and company did in Charlotte, was like, had they gone out and lost 10 miles an hour, it probably would have been a question mark for the foreseeable future. But the way they were able to rebound, not even rebound, but just to play the hand they were dealt and go right back into winning form, right back into track record setting form, I think that kind of tells the tale.
Yeah. And he kind of said it, but this just legitimizes when he goes 244. That's all it does. Because then they go, oh yeah, he went 241 and we had this intake manifold that, at another team, he was cheating. He was blah, blah, blah. And then he puts an off the shelf intake manifold on that everybody agrees is okay and goes out and runs just as fast as he did. And now they're going to work on their program. And he said they're going to go 244, 243, whatever the number is. When that happens, how can you say, oh, look, they're cheating again? Because we tore him apart, or they tore him apart, and he wasn't cheating. And Mike, you can kind of remember this from the days, I'm sure. I loved when they come and board and stroked us. I love whenever they come and took us, when you're number one qualifier or you set a new record, and they come and tear your stuff apart and they walk away with their heads down.
We never qualified number one or set any records, so we didn't have to worry about that.
Sorry,
we were trying to get back to crack a Miller Lite, so yeah, that's generally what we did.
But when Tech walks out with their heads down or nothing, don't take anything with them other than what they brought, you just want to look around at everybody standing there staring at you and just smile.
And you know what's funny, Chris? You say that too. Like, we board and stroked some cars at World Series and checked a bunch of stuff, and now it's kind of like, I mean, I don't want to say these guys are complaining about it or whatever, but it's like, I got torn down, or you checked me or whatever. But it's like you're saying, take it as a badge of honor and be glad that we're doing it.
Yeah. They're looking at you for a reason.
Yeah.
Why are they looking at you? They don't. How many times did you board and stroke the guy that was number 17 in a 16-car field? You don't.
you don't.
You get the top, not the bottom. So yeah, it's a badge of honor, and it legitimizes everything you do for the rest of the event. Because, hey, they've proven that it's okay. It's went through their scrutiny. It's all good. You go out and you reset that record again. We back with Robert Patrick in 2005. They board and stroked us twice at an event, the same motor IHRA did, because we set the record 4 times at one event. And they board and stroked us twice, even though they torque sealed the motor in and the heads on it to make sure it was the same.
Hey, believe it or not, that's still the Mountain Motor Pro Stock record.
Yeah, probably is.
It might be.
I don't even want to go there about that last 12 years.
Yeah. Well, how much? And I think our listeners would appreciate this. But like, Bob said something that I thought was interesting, and I heard this in Charlotte, that almost all of these situations are fueled by other crew chiefs chirping. How much of that happens? Like, share with us. I mean, because it's like, hey, I can't figure out why they're running so well, so they have to be cheating.
It one of two things: either I can't run that fast, so they have to be cheating, or I'm cheating and they're beating me. One of the two. And so if I'm cheating and they're beating me, they have to be cheating. But no, not, all jokes aside, 99% of the time, it comes from another team, another crew chief that's struggling a little bit. That's a top tier team, and they're struggling a little bit. You see somebody go out there and they think it makes them look stupid, and they start complaining. They start, wow, they're cheating. I saw that they had this, or I saw that they did this. We had an incident one time, and I hate to keep just reminiscing. We had an incident with Robert's car. We set a speed record, and we had Toyo front tires on the car. We were doing development for Toyo, and Mike Baker, my HRA, comes over and says, hey, you got to take those tires off. And I'm like, why? But they're not readily available. Yeah, they are. Who wants them? So I made him bring the person over that was griping about it. And I'm not going to mention names. He's a competitor today, or he still races today. But they came over and they said, well, we have to be able to buy them. I said, I want your camshaft. Well, you can't have my camshaft. We have a Kazi motor. Look, I want your camshaft. It has to be readily available. And long story short, they bought the 2 front tires for $1,500 plus next day air, but they were available. So what I'm getting, and there was no performance advantage, zero. But they sucked that weekend. They were, they were a top 3 car, and they were number 14 or 15 that weekend. And so that's just kind of how they lash out, and they pick on that guy. And unfortunate for people who are legitimate, like Tasca, who was proven legitimate. Unfortunate for them, it causes some heartache for them. But that's where it all comes from.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's kind of funny because I talk all the time. I compare drag racing in so many ways to a high school hallway. Like, there's all these different cliques, right? Yep. There's jocks and nerds and goths and all of our various versions of these things, right? And it's funny because it's a game of telephone. Like, if I had $1 for every different variation of the Tasca intake story that I've heard or been told over the course of the last couple of weeks, I mean, we'd be pretty well to do right now. I mean, everybody's heard a different version of it or whatever. And I'm glad. I mean, we did address this last week on the show, just talking about it was cool to see NHRA even attempt to kind of talk about this, or at least state their case. I do think there could have been more follow-up, especially with the way Bob went about it, because Bob, went head on and like, hey, we're going to address this. We're going to discuss it out in the open. And I would love to see a little bit more of that, from NHRA. But I do think overall it's a positive thing. And if nothing else, like anytime I see a bunch of scuttlebutt online regarding drag racing, good, bad, or otherwise, I feel it's a positive because people are talking about it. And if people are talking about it, they care. And if they care, that's what matters. Right. And I think that those moments are a positive for our sport.
It keeps it on the top of the search engine. And so that's the first thing you see. But that one thing that I will say that NASCAR does right is if there is a violation, if there's a rules issue after a race or at it qualifying, whatever it is, and they inspect a car and they find something wrong, first thing NASCAR does is they do a press release, and they do typically get up in front of on a podium and will tell the story, tell why it's wrong.
Every sport does that besides us. Yeah.
Except NHRA.
Yeah.
NHRA, IHRA was the same way. I'm not picking on NHRA. But that transparency, or they get up there and they say, hey, we tore this car apart and there was nothing. You saw us tear it apart. That's why we're talking up here. There was nothing. 100% by the rule book. That would squash some of this, this in the hallway, ninth graders versus the 12th graders bickering, because they're going to say, well, I know Joe over here was the one griping about it, and they just did a press release and there was nothing wrong. Well, Joe's an idiot, and it would kind of self-medicate itself, or it would.
I mean, I think there's a lot of benefit that could come from a little more transparency, behind some of those decisions. And I know it's an uncomfortable place to be. I feel like we have to face the music every Wednesday. You know what I mean?
That's why you get paid the big money though, to be in that position. Right. I mean, like Roger Goodell, he goes out on the stage, he gets booed. The reason is though, because eventually, like, I don't care if you're on the school board or a city council or whatever, eventually you're going to piss everybody off. I mean, like, if you're making the decisions and you're the face of that, you make a decision, you piss off half the people. Next decision, you piss off the other half of people. You know what I mean? From
my time as a tech guy though, one thing I did learn, it doesn't matter who you make mad or who you appease at the time, as long as you're consistent and you can be backed up, you can back yourself up with facts, they cannot be mad at you. They can't disrespect, they have to respect you. If you can go to the rule book and show them by page what it is, prove what it is, they may not agree with it and they're pissed off, but they have to respect you. And even as a tech guy, that's how I felt. But as an organization, it's the same way. They should be able. Wes, you remember one of the, and I'm not going to name any names, but one of the World Series of Pro Mod, we found a car that had an illegal rear gear in it, and it was a little bit of with everybody involved, it was a little bit of a touchy situation, but we had to deal with it and we had to address it. And in the end, the guy wasn't happy. He had to take the rear gear out of the car. He wasn't happy. But then an hour later, he comes over and he's like, you know what? I know it because you checked me and caught that. You protect me from everybody else just the same.
Well, and I mean, and what was interesting about that particular deal was that car had been running that gear ratio all year long.
Yeah.
And we were 8 months into the season. So it's like, that was something that I was proud of. Like Chris and I hung our hat on that. That was like reason to crack open a beer. Cause it's like, hey, we caught something that had otherwise been undiscovered for the last several months of racing. And I think that type of thing is important. Like for me, the legitimacy of the competition is not a goal. That's not an aspiration. That's an expectation.
Yeah.
Like that cannot be drawn into question. And the moment it is, I mean, honestly, I think that that's perhaps the reason we haven't seen more traction in sports gambling in our space, because of some of that shit of guys laying up or guys, strategically qualifying in certain positions so that they can, impact their first round matchup or whatever. I mean, we have to be mindful of that as a sport, that we have to hold ourselves to a really high standard if we're ever going to get to that next level, because that proverbial next level, every one of those comes with increasing eyeballs, increasing investments, more and more stakeholders. And as more people and deeper pockets and bigger operations and bigger sponsors get involved, that expectation is it's just going to be magnified over time. So, I mean, I appreciate the NHRA doing what they can. Jim Parks is in the comments right here saying they've been doing a lot more spur of the moment inspections in multiple classes, not just the fuel ranks. I've heard that as well. I think the NHRA suffered from a little bit of they had to shrink their team during the COVID years, and resources were limited
to do that.
And I think they're in the
and
process
to even
of getting
publicize
back.
it.
Yeah,
Talking about publicizing it, get up on doing a press release and getting up on a stage and talking about it. That is hard to do as well and takes resources. And so not only to enforce it, but just to get the communication aspect of it well oiled and communicated is another resource. And I don't think that they want to devote that resource to that as well.
Yeah, and none of this is meant as a diss to NHRA. It's they're the premier organization. A lot of where we are is because of them. And all of this is just discussion. But, if we go back to 10, 12 years ago, NHRA's tech department, I don't know the numbers, but I'm going to say it was 3 times what it is now, people wise. So they've seen the effects of the financial strains, and they've seen the effects of getting good employees. We used to, when we raced NHRA Pro Stock, I mean, it wasn't uncommon for them to, hey, we're going to template your car just out of the blue. Kiwi, the guy was from Australia, New Zealand. He would just come over, hey, roll over here. We're gonna tech your car again. Well, you just did it one run ago. Yeah, we're just gonna do it again. They had no reason to. They didn't. There was no performance or anything. They just wanted to show you that they were staying diligent, and that's good for an organization. And then, of course, like Mike said, as resources diminish and you can't devote resources to that, the fan base or the internet has multiplied this. Oh yeah, I ain't been teched in 17 races. They haven't done this to me. That doesn't mean they're not doing their job. They're just selectively doing their job better.
Well, it's like, where did you qualify?
Yeah, they're
what I mean?
They're not just pulling you out for no reason like they did us just to retemplate the body. They're not just doing that anymore, but they're watching, hey, wow, you run 3 miles an hour faster in the back than anybody else. Hey, let's template his body. It's not that they're not doing that. You just don't see it as prevalent and random as you used to. They're still looking at the sheets. They're still watching the run sheets. Hey, wow, this car, 60 footed, went 940 and every other car went 990. Yeah, he's dragging the blanket. Let's go check and make sure it fits the 2-inch rule, and they're doing that. It's just, we don't see it because it's not as random and prevalent. And the only time we hear about it is when somebody jumps on, on social media and starts yapping on it.
I got 2 kind of closing things here, guys. And Chris, I want to tell you, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. Mike Anytime. And JT, you guys don't have a choice. So, but thank you for being here. It means a lot to me. Blake, you two in the green room, and all of you guys for being a part of this. A couple of things that I just think are fun to talk about.
He just did the fireworks thing.
He did the fireworks thing. Going kind of full circle back to some of our No Prep Kings conversation and just looking toward the future. One of the things that we have some internal debate here, but about, and JT, feel free to chime in because he's one of the opposing voices, if you will, is
contrarian.
It's got to dare to be different. That's JT's
That's the
motto.
nicest thing I've ever heard him called.
Devil's advocate.
Devil's advocate.
I feel good about myself.
One of the things that we've seen over the course of like the last, I think probably 20 years is fair, is kind of this desire to be perpetually blowing the scoreboards down. right? Like that somehow all the juice that our sport has to offer is rooted in setting that next record and setting that track record and breaking these barriers. And I think you can tell by Bob Tasca's reaction to the commentary around that 341 and that 341 run and just everything that has come with it. It's obviously very important. I mean, you look back at our sport and there are so many of these like marker moments, you know, Kenny Bernstein going 300 and the first 5 second funny car. And, there's great debate over going 200 miles an hour. And there's all these stories around it. But I'm curious, like, if you look at World Series of Pro Mod as an example, and it's something obviously we're very proud about, is keeping the performance of the cars in check and not letting it spin out of control. And this can kind of dovetail into a couple of conversations. But that's something that we're really proud of. But there is, some opposing voice that says, hey, you got to let these guys, swing for the fences, and you want these guys to constantly be evolving. But I was thinking about it a little bit last night while I was watching the Mavs get crushed by the Oklahoma City Thunder in the NBA playoffs. The NBA, they're not scoring 190 a game. You know what I mean? Like the games, they score 100 roughly. You know what I mean? Like that's typically the score. And it feels like, in matter of fact, when they do,
they are scoring more though.
They're
a lot more than like the 80s and 90s.
But that's part of my point.
Yeah,
but that's part of my point, though.
Oh, sorry.
Like that. No. But you're right. Like it has slowly evolved over time, right? And sure, they score more now than they did 20 years ago. But it's not leaps and bounds, right? We're not scoring double. And I think sometimes, like, looking at the success of No Prep Kings, and where I was kind of going to lean into that part of this, is they don't even have the scoreboards on. And I do think that it's a little bit of an impossibility for us to, like, wrap our heads around it. We can't have the high moments in our sport rooted entirely in blowing the scoreboards down or setting the next record or breaking the barrier, because those moments are few and far between. And if that's like the only thing that will get anybody excited or get any sort of like mass level buy-in or mass interest, I mean, that's problematic. Do you agree? I mean, like it can't be all about the numbers that pop up on the scoreboard. Like, I mean, NHRA in a lot of ways.
I mean, radio racing got like that for a long time. I mean, basically, they were having all the qualifying sessions, and all they wanted to do, every track wanted to have the record, right? And everybody kind of forgot about going rounds and winning the race. I mean, that's where it's at, right?
I mean, I think that's what we're doing. I thought we were drag racing, but it does seem that there are some folks that want to go land speed racing. And my argument has always been, there's a place to do that. Like, and you know what? It's great when it happens. Like when the stars and moon align and somebody goes out, Melanie Salemi or Mark Mickey or whatever, and sets the record and obliterates the track record. Those are awesome moments, but I don't know that they are significant enough on their own. They're so hard. They're so few and far between. Like that. Not every moment's going to be that.
There's two sides to it. All of that is that's the crew chief's pat on the back. So all of us that have crew chief's cars and it does it, when somebody knocks the scoreboard over, you just turn around and all the other crew chiefs are behind you. That's just your pat on the back. We don't even look at it outside as any, for anybody else to look at. It's not that, yeah, I held the record, but it's just the, hey man, you did a good job. But I agree with you. At levels, we focus on it too much. Look at the success of No Prep Kings, that it's just win or loss. But you know what that forces you to do? That forces you to pick a team. I think it forces you to pick a Ryan Martin and ride with him, or Giuseppe Gentile and ride with him. I think it forces that because you don't know what they ran. You just know that, man, this guy wins all the time and he's just winning. It's totally irrelevant of his performance, because maybe he's the third fastest guy, but he's the fastest at getting off the button all the time. And I think that helps the sport by taking that focus off of, bending the scoreboard over, setting a new record. You take the focus off of that, and now it goes back to, we're racing. Just what you said a second ago. I thought we were drag racing.
Well, right. I mean, I do feel like those lines, because JT's point about radio racing, like I wonder if there was more of an effort several years ago to keep radio versus the world from spinning out of control. I mean, I see people cheering for Pro Extreme, ADRL style Pro Extreme to return. But like, that's not a sustainable model. Like that, it's great for the, like, look no further than the news that was created earlier this year with Todd Moyer's crazy runs down in Bradenton and Jose Gonzalez and Mark Mickey's runs before that. Like, these were the talk of town. And it shows you how trained this community of people is to be laser focused on that. Like, how many pictures of scoreboards have been posted on Facebook and Instagram over the years, right? I mean, infinite number. I mean, because
the back of a camera, like take your camera, take a picture of the back of your camera. I love it.
I got to get it up so fast.
You got to get it up
to my computer with this SD
But
card.
I think No Prep King, Street Outlaws, these other things that are not reliant on the performance metrics, they got to work harder, right? Because that's not done for them. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having to work harder. You know what I mean? Like, having to find new ways to tell this story, because again, I don't mean at all to bash but I am not. I mean, it's in the intro to this show. Like, I am proud of where we have arrived. I am proud of how far this sport has come, but I don't think we're anywhere near the finish line. I feel it's important to reiterate this, that they've been racing cars since they made the second one. How is this sport not a part of mainstream sports culture? How am I able to watch ESPN? Most days, ESPN's playing in my office all day long. From the time I get in here until the time I leave, I'm not seeing drag racing highlights. I'm not seeing really major motorsports being talked about at all. And it's like, how have we allowed a situation to exist where we're not part of that world, especially if you consider the accessibility of our sport, the diversity of our sport, the relatively low barrier to entry to our sport. I mean, I think these things, we've got all this going for us, but we continue to do it the same way. We're laser focused on 343, these numbers and who's going to run 349 or whatever, and you can see, like, again, there's no greater example perhaps in recent times than Radio versus the World. It became a race to the 340s. And all of a sudden, if you didn't have the financial wherewithal or the team and equipment behind you to run those numbers, you may as well stay home or drop into another category.
That started when it was a race to the threes.
Yeah.
But back up to your question a minute ago, Wes, like, watching ESPN, I think the problem is as a society, we don't embrace motorsports as much because, so what's on ESPN? Basketball, football, baseball, that's what's constantly on. That's what you're seeing constantly. That's the mainstream sports, soccer. How many of your kids play those sports in high school? Every one of them can play every one of those sports because we've embraced it. We've made it an entry level sport that I can play on my kid can play on the local football team, and then we can watch NFL tomorrow night, whatever. And this is the progression of it. We as a society, and it's partially our fault as race side, we haven't mainstreamed that early enough. We don't try to go get these kids. We don't try to set up programs. And I'm going to put this out in NHRA that their best interest would be to set up, and they've tried different avenues, but join up with some high schools or some tech schools and start a drag race program at a VOTech school.
They've actually just launched a new program called Become a Racer or something like
Perfect.
That they're trying to kind of address that let's get, don't be intimidated by what you see at the highest levels. Bring your street car out and let's learn the basics of racing. They actually just sent out a press release about that this week.
Well, I mean, I think about some of these colleges that have, like, and you would know better than I, Chris, but like these makeshift Formula One cars or makeshift Indy cars.
Formula SAE, right here at Rolla, right by us.
Yeah. So like that, to me, I had a guy, Greg Gill, the CEO of Global GT World Challenge. It's a road racing circuit. SRO America, I think, is actually the name of the company. But Greg, he told me, he goes, the thing about drag racing, it is like it's the first bridge you cross in motorsports, typically. Like, no matter where your motorsports journey takes you, if you decide to go into road racing or if you, whatever it is, more than likely you got your feet wet or got your first taste of motorsports competition at a drag strip because you could take your daily driver there. You could take your mom's minivan there. You could go be a part of the scene without having to go buy a race car or a purpose-built car or an SCCA rally race type of car. And I think that sometimes like we get so laser focused as a sport on like what's wrong that we don't have enough appreciation and excitement around what's right.
What's right.
Right.
Well,
because there's a lot of right here.
Every kid, what's the very first the first thing you ever drag race in your life is when you get a bicycle. You get a bicycle and your friend and you try to outrun them. So
everyone's done it.
But we don't teach them to do that. You do that from the inside. That it's
everybody has a competitive bone in their body. Like even
absolutely.
the non-competitive people do.
At some level.
And right. And where they drop off of the chart is how much of that they have in them. If they drop off, if after the bicycle, they're done. Well, they had that much in them. Well, then they go and they get a go-kart. Now they race their friend's go-kart. Well, now that's another level. Now they get a car. But we don't embrace enough of that. We don't make that, we don't make heroes out of, and I'm going to throw John Force back. When John Force wins a world championship, does the president invite him to come and sit down at the White House and have dinner? No, but the World Series winners do. The Super Bowl winners do.
I got to be honest. Like, I think a lot of that is being willing to do the work. Like, yeah. But I mean, they'll. I mean, Joe Biden's White House would would bring the local high school, the guys who won the hot dog eating contest. They bring them in. But I do think that a lot of that is like raising your hand. The greasy wheel gets the grease, right? Like some of that is like being willing to take the chances and to make the investments. Like I think sometimes back to there used to be buzz in the drag racing space, like, oh, we don't get any, print media attention from the USA Today or New York Times, these big print properties. It's like, buy some ads, guys.
Put yourself out there.
Buy some ads. Rub some backs. Buy 10 or 12 full page ads.
Keith Berry used to buy a full page ad of himself, like
hey, in Drag Illustrated.
Hey, just want to buy a full page ad and just want to put on there how great I am. But it works. It's just
sells
like that.
That sells them, and then
he thanked all of his sponsors while he was in there too.
But it sells him. It sells the persona, and then you know what? Somebody goes and buys Drag Illustrated to look at it, to laugh at that. But guess what? They bought Drag Illustrated. They looked at it and they laughed at it. So you got them there. You got them in, and you got it. It's kind of like the whole, bad press is as good as good press because it's still press. Or go to NASCAR and see, they rate their cars by the amount of minutes on TV, or seconds, actually 1/10 of a second on TV. A lot of times if you're not a top 5 car, it pays more money. You're higher valued if you crash. If you can't be a top 5 car because of the exposure you get, and sponsors look at that. But the thing is, that's bad press. Okay. Yeah. But it got him out there.
Yeah.
The world saw that. The world saw 3 minutes of this crash and the winner got 2.
Yeah.
Get it out there. You get it out there. You got to get it out there
some way. And that's, I think, one of the challenges that exists in our sport. And I will close on this. There's a comment here on YouTube. Todd Saley, drag racing has been and always will be a niche sport. And to be honest, like I appreciate what he's saying, but I think that is something that's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think that is something that this entire community of people has kind of accepted. But it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, again, another combat sports example, but if you would have told somebody, this group of people 20 years ago, that cage fighting would be one of the biggest sports in America, despite the fact that it's illegal in like 49 of the 50 states in the country and isn't available to be seen anywhere other than your local VHS rental store, if you would have told those people that it's going to be one of the biggest sports and its athletes would be household names 20, they would laugh at you. And I think that we kind of need to get our heads in the game a little bit and go, this is fertile soil we're walking on. Like, the fact that we have all these people here and we have this significant community just makes the future that much brighter. Like, we don't have to build it necessarily. Like, we don't have to, we've already got generations of racers. We've got people that have been doing this for their entire lives and have dedicated their entire lives to it. What we have to do is we have to create that bright, shiny new thing. We have to create something to go pursue, because drag racing to me is the great American motorsport. I mean, the things we hear about in the media world is an ever lessening attention span. The society today just struggles. Like, we've got so many notifications and dings and bings and stuff happening. Our kids are busier than ever. We're busier than ever. We have to find a way to, like, cut through all of that. And I think that the opportunity exists here. I mean, there is no doubt in my mind that in this short attention span world we live in, drag racing is a perfect fit. This shit's over. It reminds me of power slapping.
It's over in 10 seconds.
Highlight reel. It's over in 10 seconds. I mean,
whatever.
And I don't know. It's easy to understand. You know, one car wins, one car loses. Like, we can't just put our bracket racing hats on and say, oh, our sport's too complicated. What we've got to do is simplify and scale. And I think that the opportunity is there. I want to give a huge shout out. I didn't get him mentioned earlier. Mark Beatty and the whole team at Redline Oils. Support those that support us. Log on to redlineoil.com. Make sure you get yourself hooked up with the best in the business. Those who know. Chris, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
JT,
you.
Mike, as always, guys, great conversation today. Appreciate everybody who tunes in. Remember to click like, click share, click subscribe. Help us spread the gospel of drag racing. And we will see you next Wednesday right here on the Drag Illustrated YouTube channel and Facebook page. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Later, y'all.
See ya.